By all means, Andor shouldn't work. I don't know a single person who wanted this guy, whose name I could barely remember, to get a spin-off TV show. But somehow they created a show that's not just some of the best TV ever, but also one of the best Star Wars projects of all time. Respectfully, it wipes the floor with the prequels, sequels, and all but one of the OG trilogy, and that's debatable. Andor is a once-in-a-lifetime show that we will most likely never receive again, especially under the leadership of Mr. Dave Pepperoni. The characters in this show are so complex and well-defined, yet are also overshadowed by the gripping period of the Star Wars world that the show takes place in. What makes Andor so interesting is that Star Wars operates in a universe that is very light side versus dark side. Good versus bad, red lightsabers versus blue lightsabers, you know how this goes. But this show operates only in that gray area.
There's a little gray area in there, and that's where you operate.
And that's really interesting because you don't see that a lot in this universe, only really in other shows like Clone Wars. People are evil, selfish, and use the tools of their enemy on both sides. Their flaws are seen on full display compared to the ever-present, positive, flawless Jedi, and then the full evil, dark Sith. This is also one of the most beautiful meditations on the current political climate I've ever seen, and therefore, I do want to address the liberal agenda. Yes, there's a lot of commonality with what's happening today and what happened in this show. I don't think that's an accident. If that disinterests you, or you think that Star Wars has gotten too woke, this isn't the video for you, and I hope you have a great life, but go ahead and just click off. But finally, to set up what this video is, I'm going to be going in order of each episode to avoid some confusion and ranking these episodes as we go on this tier list, with a final list ranking every episode at the end. Feel free to use this video as a recap if you need it as well. I understand this show's been out for a little bit now. This video is also part 1 of 2, which I will have another part coming soon covering season 2, and then doing a full ranking of every episode by the time we get to the end of that. Without further ado, let's get into it with episode 1, Cassian. The opening of this show is killer, with an ominous rain setting making a great atmosphere. The murder that happens feels serious, and suddenly a blaster that in other Star Wars properties doesn't hold any weight feels like a deadly pistol, and we saw something we shouldn't have. The introduction of Syril in this episode, with him tailoring his uniform and being a supreme bootlicker, is kind of sick and shows a lot about his character in just a few moments.
Have you modified your uniform?
Perhaps slightly. Pockets piping and some light tailoring.
The subtlety of this show is just so fresh, and in your first scene with meeting a character like Brazo, they are only speaking in subtext the whole time. That takes balls. If, like me, this is your first time interacting with season 1 since it came out, I bet you forgot about Scottish Tim here.
Are we betting on the Wabani run tomorrow?
Every conversation Cassian has with the people on Ferrix, you can feel the history between them, the characters, and you understand how much Cassian has messed with these people, pulled favors till the end of their rope. We're not being introduced to this world through him. This world has long existed, and we're just being dropped into the middle of it. One strong criticism against this episode is that it just kind of ends. It's very out of nowhere and doesn't really feel satisfying. And I would just overall say that the first scene is the best scene. Seeing Cassian get racially profiled by ISB agents within the first scene of the show definitely puts a bad taste in your mouth when it comes to the ISB and shows you the type of topics that the show will be covering. Overall, not a bad introduction, but nothing special. Going in the C tier. Episode 2. That Would Be Me. God, what a terrible title. That's like, that would be me, princess. That would be me. That would be me. Just insanely cringe. But that's not the only thing bad about this episode. It's a really forgettable one overall. You do get the introduction of Luthen, and that's probably the most interesting part. Stellan Skarsgård is always interesting in pretty much every role I've seen him in. But in this episode, he doesn't really do much besides aura farm a little bit and talk to a random guy on a bus. Syril's speech is another notable scene because it's so cringeworthy and hard to watch, but Tim rats out Andor in this episode, and his accent I just cannot take seriously. It is so funny. It sounds like he's got layers like an onion.
Oh, come on, it's just a joke.
It's episodes like these that just make me really want to just view the arcs in their entirety, because this one is clearly just setting up the pieces for the climax in the next episode. That's why there will be an arc ranking at the end of this whole thing, but that'll be in part 2 once I've covered every arc, because only 4 in this season isn't really enough. So make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you know when that video comes out. This episode I truly have the least to say about, and unless there's some stinker in season 2 that I'm forgetting, then I think I can confidently say this is the worst episode of the show. F tier. Episode 3, Reckoning. I'm going to compare this to my favorite show of all time, Succession, but this is one of those shows where the worst episodes are the first episodes, because it just keeps getting better and better. So yeah, the first 2, C and F tier, not that important, but now we're getting to some real shit, and it'll just keep getting better from here. She's being very polite. So to start, am I tripping? Is this the first time Andor's ever seen his reflection, or no? That can't be. There's water. What am I talking about? Of course, he's seen his reflection in water. Seeing the more primitive Star Wars tech, such as the bus, really makes the high-level Empire stuff we see seem so much more separate and rich. That doesn't only apply to the setting, but it also applies to the droids, because seeing current B and then past B is very cool, and I appreciate that he's worn down, unlike R2-D2 and C-3PO, who stay clean and shiny for pretty much the whole franchise. There's some really good dialogue in this episode about how Cassian got the box in the first place, and how he says this.
You just walk in like you belong.
Something I've never gotten over is how Luthen calls Andor the hard R, and no, I'm not in that way. He just says Andor.
These days will end, Cassian Andor.
There's so much connecting what happens current day to this episode for me. The citizens of Ferrix banging sounds invokes people honking horns and blowing whistles around ice vehicles today. You can see that this community has dealt with Imperial engagement before, but not to this extent, and it'll just get worse from here. Bix immediately gets profiled and taken because she looks scared. And then the shootout set piece room is sick. I don't know what this room is for or what it really is, and all there's chains on the ceiling, but it allows for creative fighting and cover. That's kind of the beauty of sci-fi. It doesn't really require an explanation for everything in the world. We can just accept it for what it is. Tim, which I'm just now noticing is with an extra M, because I guess Star Wars, he eats shit because he just doesn't think and runs towards ISB. Very sad death, one of the worst in the franchise. I mean, I stopped watching after Tim died. The whole set piece feels very one battle after another to have this whole town capable and ready to fight. Syril's pain reminds me of Kendall's from episode 6 of Succession, which that's the second Succession video and only 3 episodes discussed. Honestly, I love Fat Bastard and I wish he made a return. So I wrote that in the script before I found out that he does make a return and just completely forgot he was in the finale, but we'll get to that when we get there. Finally, hearing about Cassian's father being publicly executed and then seeing it in this flashback is vital. This was just an amazing episode with a peak ending, great action, amazing character moments, and it's one of my favorite of this beginning chunk. So I'm going to put it in the A tier. Episode 4, Aldhani. What's so important about this episode is highlighting how Cassian doesn't want to fight. We get many introductions in this episode, and a lot of them are just seeing them from other stuff, because we got Game of Thrones, we got The Bear, we got Black Mirror, I could go on. There's a lot of great casting. Stellan's acting ramps up throughout the season, and he gets some heat here with this look at me moment.
Goes down along the way. For the next 3 days, if for any reason, look at me!
Look at me.
Speaking of, I also adore this moment when Luthen is getting into character before returning to Coruscant. Vel is not one of my favorite characters, and she's introduced in this episode. To me, she just kind of represents just a rebel, just the rebellion, and that's it. Of course, she has more interpersonal relationships with other people, but past this arc in the season, she's just kind of floating around, and it's a little frustrating. Dedra's introduction is quaint and subtle, and on this rewatch, my fiance asked if I thought everyone in the Empire was bad while Lonnie was talking. That put a smile on my face. Syril's mom is also introduced in this episode, and we get to see more of the lower levels of Coruscant, which have always interested me, especially in Clone Wars and other properties. Mothma, my goat, is introduced, and I love the scene where they are speaking in subtext. Almost half the scenes that happen in Coruscant have some type of subtext to them where they can't fully say everything they're trying to communicate. This episode has a lot of setup for Aldhani and the heist, and just a lot of info thrown at you, but it's really nothing special, just putting everything in play for the arc to come. So it's going to go in the C tier. Episode 5, The Axe Forgives. First off, she's spitting facts.
Any civilized being knows an open invitation is no invitation at all.
The fact that Cloris was set up in Mon's second episode is kind of wild, especially knowing that he eventually gets killed by Andor in the finale. I can't be too loud, my fiance's in there. Mon seems like a neglectful mother at first and kind of a deadbeat, which is tragic in itself, and you really can't blame her daughter for being angsty with her. If she's not around that often, that's kind of expected. This Nemec scene is so standout and one of my favorite moments of the episode. It's very relevant to today, but obviously I could just say that about so many parts of this show. I love how Andor steps up to be the pilot out of selfishness and not out of trying to succeed in this mission. He doesn't want to die, he wants to make it out of there, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to make that possible. We get a lot of prep for the heist in this episode, including the scene where Cassian shows how observant he is by exposing everyone for being right-handed except for Cousin. I think my favorite part of this episode is the fun puzzle of trying to understand each character's motivation for being at this mission. There's a really great quote that kind of exemplifies this with everyone has their own rebellion, which could also be flipped to say everyone has their own reason to joining the rebellion. And honestly, by the end, you can't really blame Skeen for being pissed about the Kyber and being sus of Clem, because yeah, he is sus, only in his self-interest, which he knows more than anybody else here, which we'll get to in the next episode. Very strong setup, not a bad one. I'm going to go with a B tier. Episode 6, The Eye. This episode has a gorgeous explanation of how the Empire takes over the native people's land, and there are phrases in this scene that just make your skin crawl. The way that these ISB fucks talk about these native people is really disturbing, and honestly, that's something I really appreciated on this rewatch, is viewing this whole heist and the whole situation from the perspective of the natives. I have more to say on that in a second, but first, finding out that the black guy was a stormtrooper is just like watching the trailer for Force Awakens for the first time.
A black stormtrooper. Yeah, right. A black stormtrooper.
There are a lot of conversations in this episode to do with using the same dirty tactics the Empire uses, being cursed to use the enemy's weapons, things like that, which is just a theme that exists throughout a lot of this show. What's so interesting about this heist is that the rebels are also using the native people and abusing their home and their sacred day. They're using all these things as cover, as an advantage, as an opportunity or a window to strike the Empire while they're weak. Nemec is so likable and clearly the character I relate to the most, being a young liberal college student. I love how we see this random general's family as well, highlighting how this show, like Clone Wars, shows all sides of the conflict and gives attention to even minor characters. Like, their family didn't need to be witnesses to this, but this general honestly got a lot of time to shine in this episode. Another thing I love is how this show doesn't have many stormtroopers. I mean, yes, there are some in the big scenes, the big army scenes, but for the most part, these are all kind of employees that are unmasked soldiers, making their deaths feel a little bit more heavy. They don't just feel like mindless death that could happen in any Star Wars movie of just random stormtroopers being sliced up with lightsabers. Not only that, but there are guns in this show that don't even look like Star Wars guns. Like look at that. That's an AK-47. Having constant cutting to the eye ritual builds tension and reminds the audience that these people get nothing out of this. They get absolutely nothing. The ritual is just as important as the heist in this episode through my eyes. There's just so many moments I could praise, like how they make the general do the manual labor as well, as if there's no hierarchy to it. I could gush about the eye visuals forever as well. I mean, this is maybe the most gorgeous thing in Star Wars, only close to Crate in The Last Jedi. Skeen's final betrayal after the whole thing is genius, and he reflects a worse version of Cassian. He kind of acts as a fence post, showing a line that Cassian will not cross, so even though he's selfish, he's not immoral like he is. Obviously, there's many deaths in this episode, the worst and most heartbreaking being Nemec, as I've gushed about him a couple times. One last thing I want to mention is that the Gormans are first mentioned by Mon in this episode, which is just crazy setup. This is a peak episode, one of the best of the show, and just the moment that I was sold on Andor. My first watch and on my second watch, knowing that this show truly is a masterpiece. So this is going to be our first episode in the S tier. Episode 7, Announcement. This is kind of an underrated episode, to be honest. I love seeing Mon Mothma's fear about what she is helping with and worries about what she's starting with this heist because she didn't even know it was going to happen. There are so many banger Luthen quotes as well, such as,
The Empire has been choking us so slowly we're starting not to notice.
I love this moment where Syril steps out of the way of a mouse droid. And while it's kind of funny, I also feel like it's symbolic in some way. He is such a bootlicker to the highest authority that he will step out of the way of a mouse droid. Something I completely forgot about season 1 is that Clea puts a hit out on Cassian. And for the rest of the season, Clea and Luthen want him dead. That is dark and amazing. I love how Tay is introduced here and is scared to open up about how he feels about the Empire and assumes that Mon is with them because of the crowd she rolls with. This scene is honestly the highlight of the episode for me, and when Mon drops her act and knows she can trust him, ooh man, it is so good. It's also crazy that we get to see the clone troopers in the episode, and they genuinely look so good. It's kind of unnecessary but welcomed fan service, but I do think it serves a purpose because it shows the time frame of the flashback, considering the clones are still being used. Another standout scene is Marva and Cassian's last scene together. He doesn't know this, but this will be the last time they ever speak, and it is tragic. There's so many banger points like the love line and her killing any thought about the show having to do with the finding of Cassian's sister.
Stop searching for your sister. It's a fantasy. There were no survivors on Canary.
Even though my fiance still thinks somehow we're gonna find her eventually, I don't want to kill her dream, so hopefully Cassian's sister's still out there. Meero also gets a strong girl boss moment that is the start of her and Partagaz's mentorship. It's so fun remembering how much I fucked with her and wanted her to succeed before she actually does. And then once she starts succeeding, you're like, oh shit, I guess I didn't want this. The episode closes out with Chief Keef partying in Miami and getting falsely swatted by the Empire, once again being racially profiled, which happens a lot in this show. He gets handled by an Empire droid that almost hangs him, which of course is kind of a connection to K2SO, which we'll get to in season 2. And the final thing I want to mention is Keef Girgo is an amazing Star Wars name. The Star Wars names in this show are absolutely at their finest. Pretty great episode, honestly. I'm gonna put it in a solid B tier position. Episode 8, Narkina 5. Here we fucking go. The start of the prison arc. To begin, Syril and Dedra meet for the first time and are at odds with each other, surprisingly. The introduction to Narkina is just intimidating. It feels kind of like a spooky Star Wars version of the Raft in the MCU. The Nickelodeon moon boots are silly at first, but become disturbing when you realize what their use is. And just the floor tech in general is overall pretty disturbing. Not as disturbing as this freaked out guard who seems to really enjoy it. Like, this isn't a job to him. Screw the money. You did it for fun. He gets off on it. My fiance predicted that Syril would turn to the rebellion eventually because the Empire kept dismissing him and mistreating him, which really made me smile. I can't wait to see her reaction when we get to season 2. Kino Loy's introduction explains almost everything about him and what he cares about in just that one scene, which is so impressive. We really get to see how his experience here has affected him and how it has changed his attitude.
Get busy or get fried!
Hey man, that's two great choices. I love the line where Mon says she's gotten better at pretending in relation to enjoying so much alcohol, and her husband says that he doubts it. That's pretty ironic. And honestly, this whole scene, I think there's a metaphor with the wine itself. Anyway, I love the prisoners discovering that the justification the Empire gave them wasn't real, and that they blame the rebels for it. Kino cares so much about the numbers and the facts that his sentence will end soon, but as soon as he finds out that isn't true, he changes. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. We get a lot to learn about Mon in this episode, such as we find out she was married at 15 and then became a senator at 16. So she's been doing this for a long time and probably didn't have the best childhood growing up. A kind of blemish on this episode is there's a pretty forgettable scene in Ferrix with Vel and Brasso. Two individual scenes, but nonetheless not that important either way. Clea shutting down the line to Ferrix doesn't feel like much looking back, but it does pose a what if as to what Bix would do earlier if they didn't shut the line off, or if they actually reached out. When the guy unalives himself on the floor, All the prisoners talk about it and how it will affect them in their production, kind of implying that this does happen pretty often and that there's no real shock anymore. Pun not intended. Moving on to Luthen's side of the episode, we get an introduction to Saw Gerrera, and it's kind of a little underwhelming. Now, yes, Saw has been in a lot of Star Wars media. However, this is my fiance's first time seeing him, and honestly, he's not really in the most popular projects, so him being introduced here, I think is meant for the Star Wars fans that have already known about him, but if this is your introduction, it's kind of a little strange. Just seeing Forrest Whitaker and Skarsgård go at it is just magnifique. Dedra is actually a great actress with this big scene, making her think that she messed up that other dude on purpose or didn't mean for Bix to see him being screwed up. This episode is really strong and fires on all fronts for every story except for a couple Ferrix moments. Every storyline gets a strong, maybe even underrated scene in this episode, with of course the prison being the main meat of what we have to chew on. I love this episode a lot, so I'm going to put it right in the A tier. Episode 9, Nobody's Listening. Dedra is so intimidating, and I completely forgot that Clea was right, that if she didn't cut the line, Dedra would have found them immediately. Just another point in the bucket as to why Clea is so underrated. On this rewatch, I feel like I fully understood Kino more than I did on my initial watch because I knew where his story was headed. The numbers are what drives him, both the production and the sentences. He's a microcosm for indoctrination in the Empire. They squeeze your rights so tightly that the little freedom that they give you, the little hope they give you, can be the sole driving force of a person. Speaking of hope, the transition from A New Hope with the torture scene is hard as fuck. Whoever did this...
Someone cooked here.
Uncle Harlow being mentioned so many times by Syril's mom but never showing up is hilarious. It reminds me of Charlie's uncle from Smiling Friends, which I wrote that into the script before the last 2 episodes came out, so I guess that's a little null and void. But if you also like Smiling Friends and like this type of format of video, I did the exact same thing, linked right here, so if you want to check it out, I'd really appreciate it. Beyond that, if you want to see me add the newest 2 episodes to that tier list and maybe do a little retrospective on the show as a whole, now that it's over, please let me know. Another small moment with my favorite character, Mon Mothma, is her implying that she wants to cheat with Tay, but it's too selfish of a choice. Beyond that, she has so many other struggles at this point that cheating being added to it would just throw a whole wrench in her plans. Kino keeps insisting that he only has 40 shifts when asking for help for Olaf.
I don't want to know his name.
He's got 40 shifts left.
Of course, Olaf dies in this episode, and it's kind of sad to just see this old man break. The medic is honestly a very interesting character for his brief scene, feeling kind of helpless to the deaths that are happening in the prison. The reveal that no one gets out is really heartbreaking and genuinely makes your stomach drop. And it culminates in the most hype ending for an episode, in my opinion. This is a very strong one, with the ending probably being its biggest strength. It's going to go in the B tier. Episode 10, One Way Out. Oh yeah, it's this one. It's this one. To start, I love this line that Andor says.
Power doesn't panic.
I know, actually, fuck that. There are too many lines in this episode to point out. This episode is just that good. Before we get to the actual escape, I gotta mention, Cassian needs to stop aura farming with this floor. Like, get up, bro. Get up. Get up! Mon Mothma's approach with the idea of an arranged marriage for her daughter, which is a pretty upsetting revelation. And then we get introduced to everyone's second favorite fictional Davos Skolden. But let me get to what you really care about, the breakout, which is electric, literally. This dweeb on the PA system uses a voice changer to have his fake aura, but for some reason when Kino goes, he's got no voice changer, I guess. He doesn't need a voice changer to have aura. But man, what a speech. There are just so many moments. I'm just going to gloss over it completely because if you really just want to enjoy and talk about how good the scene is, please go rewatch it again. Comment what you think because I would love to gush about it with you. Just to get to the end, seeing Kino's face when he realized what's going to happen, it's such a mix of satisfaction and fear and happiness and sorrow, but I ultimately think he's happy with how it all ended. As if this episode couldn't get any better, we get the monologue, the Luthen monologue, which also includes Alani being officially introduced to this show in his true colors, but it's obviously overshined by the highlight of what he causes. The vow Luthen speaks of in this scene reminds me of the one in the mob for The Sopranos.
We took a vow.
I'm giving you Dedra Meero. I'm giving you Spellhouse. I'm warning you about Ferrix. I'm honoring my vow.
The vow Luthen speaks of reminds me of the mob in The Sopranos, and like that show, many people who take the vow die for it. Honestly, I have nothing new to add to this speech. It's perfect, and so is this episode as a whole. It fires on all cylinders and is truly a masterpiece, and it's going straight to the S tier, if there was any shock. Okay, I'm done with the electric floor puns. Episode 11. Daughter of Ferrix. This episode is truly boiled down to a setup for Rick's Road, but that shouldn't dismiss its values. The reveal of Marva's death from B's POV is so fucking depressing, and B reminds me of a dog whose owners passed away and just can't process it. They would be really hard on a droid that doesn't understand death that well. Dedra is such a frustrating character because she's actually really damn good at her job, especially compared to her boyfriend. You don't want her to succeed, but you kinda do, and you gotta respect her for the game that she's putting on. Like, if this was the NBA, she'd be LeBron right now. This one random scene with the practical Narkinian people just keeps up the amazing practical effects of this show and puts in effort where they really didn't have to do it. Even just this tiny scene shows how the locals are affected by the Empire as well, and the brief things they discuss about having the Narkina prison on their planet. Clea has a very similar "what do you sacrifice" moment when she's asked by Vel what she's been contributing lately.
I have a constant blur of plates spinning and knives on the floor and needy, panicked faces at the window, of which you are but one of many.
On this rewatch, I had to double check to see if Vel and Mon were actually cousins because I couldn't tell if that was just a front as well, like so much of the Coruscant story. I don't know if you remember that I mentioned earlier. But my Scottish goat Mosk returns in this episode and gets a full in-person reintroduction in the next one just to do literally nothing. But once again, getting ahead of myself, I'm just happy to have him here. This jolly fat bastard, I love him. I also really fuck with those Star Wars ties that Syril wears that kind of just go on your shirt like that, in your shirt. I don't know, it's very, very interesting. I kind of wish we had that IRL. This small scene right here confirms to me that Andor, like Lando, is pansexual. If you disagree,
I didn't know he said that. How can you not be pansexual in space? There's so many things. There's so many things to have sex with.
This Saw scene is also amazing, and I love that Saw tweaks out when he realizes what's going on and thinks that Luthen has friends everywhere. One of the most out of place scenes, but I kind of love it, is this escape that Luthen has when he's getting pulled in by the Empire in his ship. The ship itself is unlike anything I've seen, unless I'm wrong. I don't think it's been in any other Star Wars properties. But I love the look of the tractor beams and just that this ship is clearly only made to kind of just pull people over. His escape is a fun shot of life into this episode that kind of really did need it. And honestly, it stands out as being one of the only tense space sequences in the entire show. Finally, Cassian finding out that his mother died and that he missed it is just another thing that the Empire has taken from him. There's nothing as good as last episode in this one, but that doesn't mean there's anything bad in it either. I think there's a lot of stuff to chew on and interesting setup for the finale, so I'm going to put it in the B tier. Finally, episode 12, Rick's Road. This episode opens very slowly and low-key as we check in with all our players and see the setup before this major event. I love how this episode kind of pulls a Better Call Saul because they don't tell us Cassian's plan till we see it play out, but we know that he has to have a plan because so many people here are hunting him. You could boil it down to just two major parties, but one of them is just trying to capture him and the other is trying to kill him. And it's crazy that the Empire is not the one trying to kill him. It's Luthen. The music in this episode carries a lot of weight and makes the emotions felt. Something I really want to highlight about Ferrix as a whole, and I kind of touched on it earlier, but I feel like it's easier to make a futuristic high-tech society in sci-fi, kind of like Coruscant. But what is really challenging is making a small community feel real, futuristic, but also grounded in the world, like they don't have the best technology, and they're still using bricks and dirt, but there's also still sci-fi elements. And finally, once everything gets into place for Rick's Road, we have an amazing speech that honestly gets me fired up every time I see it. Someone I paid attention to a little bit more on this rewatch is Will, because I know where he's going. he's kind of a very subtle background character that gets to do a lot more in season 2, kind of making me feel like they didn't know he was going to be as important as he was. But then we also get strong moments with him, such as building the bomb in the beginning, which we don't initially know is a bomb, and then he blows up a huge thermal detonator explosion. Seeing Dedra get her shit rocked is satisfying as fuck, and Syril doesn't beat the stalker allegations by pulling up and saving her, and they have this weird moment that is like, is it sexual, is it not? And honestly, to be frank, the worst crime that the Empire commits is pushing B over. Jesus, I can't even watch. Avert your eyes. Trigger warning. I would slide for B in a heartbeat. That's my dog. Well, actually, that's my dog, but B's my other dog. The ending of Luthen and Andor scene has pretty much no tension because we all know that he doesn't kill him here. And so because of that, I kind of wish they made it seem like Andor could kill Luthen instead, because that would be believable. But I do appreciate how Andor is willing to die because he knows that what he's gotten himself into is putting people he loves in danger. So he's either willing to fully commit to the rebellion, bring him in like he's saying, or he'll die, and he's okay either way. Ultimately, I do think this episode is a little underwhelming. It doesn't live up to the hype of having every major player in one location. Some are just spectators and are sitting around like fat bastard, and others get one moment to shine that really doesn't feel that earned. The speech and the riot are amazing moments, but it doesn't really stand out as an insane finale like it really should. It is still going to be high B tier. And there we have it. That's all the episodes in season 1, kind of ranked and reviewed. But let me give you the full ranking for just this season, which I will then update in the next video. Once again, subscribe and hit the bell so you know when that comes out. Going from worst to best, we have episode 2, that would be me. Episode 1, Casa. Episode 4, Aldani. Episode 5, The Axe Forgets. Episode 11, Daughter of Ferrix. Episode 9, Nobody's Listening. Episode 7, Announcement. Episode 12, Rick's Road. Episode 3, Reckoning. Episode 8, Arcana 5. Episode 6, The Eye. And Episode 10, One Way Out. All in all, I do love this season of TV. I think it starts a little bit slow, and I can't blame my fiance for not being too into it at first because I felt the exact same way. But as you all know, because you're watching this video, when you commit to the show, it rewards itself in full. And I do think part of that is because season 2 is better to me. But we'll have to see because I haven't done a full rewatch of all the way through. Looking beyond season 2, I'm looking forward to showing my fiance season 1, season 2, and then Rogue One because she's never seen any of this, including Rogue One. I'm really interested what she thinks of that movie from the perspective of viewing Cassian's story completely through and how it will affect her mindset of the ending. Anyway, thank you guys for watching so much. If you made it this far in the video, I'd really encourage you to subscribe and like. It means a lot to me. Comment your favorite episode or favorite scene of this season and let me know what you're excited for in season 2. Thank you guys again, and stay rebellious.